It's great to be here, and great to have a lovely panel that are going to appear on our screens in a few moments. I have Catherine minding me here as well, and minding all of us as well. So welcome to the end of our day. It's the MDN at 25. We've had a fantastic walkabout in relation to celebrating our day and celebrating 25 years. We've had incredible workshops, we've had incredible speakers, and hopefully for the end of the day now, we're going to have a conversation which is going to focus on where is the hope and what does it look like. So I think that's a lovely way to come in to land the day. And to help us do that, I suppose we have some really good people with us. We're going to bring them to the screen slowly but surely there. We have Noeline is here with us, Noeline Blackwell. And just to say that Noeline is a human rights lawyer, CEO of the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre. Prior to this, she had 10 years experience as Director General of Access to Justice organisation FLAC. She previously ran a solicitor's practice where she had particular interest in refugees and immigration, and she currently chairs the Independent Patient Safety Council and the Childcare Law Reporting Project. And Noeline, you're really welcome, and thanks for joining us here today as well. We met you earlier. We have Sarah there as well. Good to see Sarah as well there in the background. And Sarah is an experienced Chief Executive Officer of Women's Aid with a demonstrated history working in non-profit organisations. She's skilled in non-profit politics, operations management, communications, event management, and many more things, Sarah. We could talk about you here forever, but we want to get into the panel and ask you nice questions. But it's great that you're here with us today as well. We have Seán Cooke, who's been with us from the morning, and he launched us from the Men's Development Network as well. And Seán is our CEO here since October 2018, as well as the strategic and operational manager of the organisation. He represents Men and Men's Development Network on many different fora, internationally and nationally. And he's, I won't say how many years experience of working, especially in the community and voluntary sector. And
thanks for that, Lorcan. I appreciate that.
I won't mention your...
Keep that quiet, yeah.
Keep that in-house, Seán. Yeah. And then we've Todd as well. Todd is here, Todd Prevost. He's CEO of Sonas, the largest provider of frontline services for women and children experiencing domestic abuse in the Greater Dublin region. He also advocates on behalf of them with other services on issues that impact on the safety and welfare and well-being of women and children experiencing domestic abuse. We have a really super panel, and it's a really good conversation we're going to have because, as I say, when we sat down at the start, even planning this, we wanted to end with hope. And we're starting looking at where is the hope and what does it look like. And the first question I want to ask, and if you don't mind, Noeline, you were with us earlier as well, I wanted to ask you a question in the context of your own work and the really important work that you're involved in. For yourself, after the conference today, where do you feel, or where do you see, especially in your own working community, where do you see the hope as we go into the future?
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Lorcan. I just first of all want to say a big thank you to you and Seán and all the Men's Development Network people for bringing me along, because I think the hope that I will take away from this today is in the room. It's in the virtual room, in all that I've heard today. I think the very fact that the conference took place at all, that there is that recognition about people being their best selves was a big part of renewing hope. And what I thought I found today was that if we don't have that hope, we're kind of not only depressed ourselves, but we're useless to anybody else as well. And it seemed to me that hope isn't exactly the same as optimism. I know we were talking with Catherine earlier about the Sam Maguire going down to Kerry and that, but like getting somewhere, achieving an outcome, which Kerry have done this year, and Limerick also, of course, have done this year in the hurling, and the camogie is to come. But in all of those cases, even achieving something, and it's clear what was achieved. I was particularly taken by Gary Barker, who said, you know, look, actually, men haven't made progress all that much over the 25 years in the way that he would have hoped. But young women have, and that is so much our experience as well. Young women are driving an awful lot of our work and requiring us to hope and do better, because they are hoping for and expecting a better world.
Yeah, and Sarah, just can I bring you in on what Noeline has just said? You're on mute there at the moment, but just, you know, for your own experience as well, you've come straight from another workshop, so you've listened to a lot of different things today. For yourself, what's your own sense of that? Where is the hope then in your own experience?
Yeah, I mean, without piggybacking entirely on Noeline's feedback, that I took an awful lot from the different inputs today. And again, just to say congratulations to the Men's Development Network on the anniversary. And as I think it was Gary said earlier, it's just the fact that there's an organization that, you know, holds that really positive, you know, appropriately gendered analysis of how we all live in the world as men, as women, as people, and does work to try and improve the lives of not just men and boys, but also women and girls. You know, that always gives me hope. I think that, you know, looking at things like, you know, as Gary was saying, that double-edged sword of, you know, there's bad news, but there's good news. But the fact is that even these things are being measured, I think, and talked about, you know, so the work of, you know, gathering what is going on for how boys in particular feel they are in the world, and then using that in order to actually improve their lives and improve everybody's lives. I think that is fantastic. I take great hope.
Yeah.
Just stop there for a moment.
We've lost her there. So.
We'll come back to Sarah in a moment, because maybe we go to Todd. Todd, for yourself, while we're reconnecting with Sarah, for yourself, what do you think is the hope, and where do you see it?
Well, I think it's extremely positive. And if I can say, just throw some buzzwords that I would have heard today and some of my own thoughts. So you think about optimism, hope, and impact, progress, bridging the gap. We think about bridging the gap in that narrative, where I think that it wasn't always there. And I think that the piece for me that resonated the most is the positivity in the room. So my understanding is over 160 plus folks participating today, which is brilliant. And I always say that at the end of the day, after any presentation or any discussion, if one person leaves with that information and then they can make a change and make a person's life better, then I think we're being successful. So it's about being successful as well too. So it's just phenomenal. I think, again, and when I talk about reaching across the aisle and working together within our sector and the other sectors and working with the men's network to see just that. And so I'm extremely positive about today.
Yeah, and Seán, when you started this morning, you talked about transforming masculinities, and you talked about, you know, the journey that we're on as a nation, and even internationally, huge conversations going on. Are you hopeful after listening, especially to Michael, Gary, you know, the inputs today? What stays with you as we go towards the door of this celebration day?
Yeah, I am. I think I'm an optimistic person in the first instance. Anyway, I don't think you could be in this work if you weren't. But I am very, very hopeful, and extremely hopeful, and especially one of the reasons why we wanted to do the day and to bring in people from across the water, right? You know, it was very much around. Sometimes we listen from the prophet from without. I think that's always a kind of a critical thing that happens. But there was a huge amount of validation for me and for our organization when you hear the language that was being spoken and the term, what people were trying to do. It really consolidated and validated all of our work and our work over the past number of years, which is really, really important. So yeah, so the hope is very much there, and I think the other hope is that there's a palpable sense, I feel, of real change. I get it now. I think I get that sometimes especially around the whole idea that the language about engaging men and boys is to the forefront of what needs to happen as well. So yeah, just huge hope. I have huge hope out there in terms of where we're at, you know, you know, yeah, so absolutely, you know. Oh God, we got Sarah back in.
Sarah's back to us, and Sarah, you come back to us and tell us from Hope. Welcome home. Tell us more about Hope.
I'm so sorry. I think my son started using the PlayStation. So it was fine all day. I'm not actually sure at what point I fell off, so I don't want to risk repeating.
You just mentioned the word hope, Sarah.
That's it. I was
You
gone for
had
the
a
whole thing.
perfect pierced mouth saying hope.
So I had mentioned around the data and the fact that it was being gathered. Did that come through okay?
That came true, yeah.
Yeah. So I was about to say, and it may already now have been said, is that the hope and possibly also optimism with respect to the minister's input at the start, because I really do believe, and I've worked for over 20 years specifically on the area of kind of combating and preventing violence against women and girls, is that I don't think we've had a current kind of operating environment here where we have had a strategy that has articulated not just the work of providing supports and protection to victims and survivors, but also kind of focused heavily on legislation and prosecution, but now one that also looks at coordinated policy, but also crucially prevention. And I think so many of the conversations that have been had today are very much around that preventative piece in terms of intervening and supporting people to change their behaviors and attitudes now, but also fostering, future generations where this simply won't be a question at all.
I was just thinking earlier when I was looking at the panel and that you were coming on, the idea of splendid isolation, I often think doesn't serve anybody really well, and alliances are so important. How important do you feel alliances will be and are actually as a sign of hope in building the future?
Absolutely crucial. I think it's fundamental. And I think what's also important is, and certainly through my work over the years and my collaborations professionally with other stakeholders, it's been that, we don't always have to agree on everything. We don't always have to be in perfect harmony in order to be able to do good work together. I think there will be red lines and there will be certain, circumstances where we feel, okay, we may be either on parallel or different tracks. But I find more and more and more is where you have certain kind of foundational principles and starting points, that then there can be different ways to get to the same destination. And often we need multifaceted tracks to actually affect whole society, whole community change. So at the moment, I'm very excited by the conversations we in Women's Aid are having with Men's Development Network, with our colleagues in the domestic violence sector like Sonas, with our ongoing relationships with our colleagues in the rape crisis sector, and then also in government and in communities and in society in general. I think that it's fantastic. Everybody has a part to play on this.
And just for whoever would like to take this question, in the context of going forward then, we often hear about the invitation for us as men and boys to become part of the solution. I think Seán had mentioned that this morning as well. And in your understanding of what hope would look like, either in an action or an activity or policy, where do you feel, maybe Noeline even just to come back in, where do you feel that might look, or what would that look like or feel like for us in trying to respond as men and boys and younger men, to be part of that solution and in the transforming masculinities?
Yeah, but I thought one of the things that came across to me today was that it's so multifaceted. And again, that's already been used in this session, that, for instance, listening to the poems that you brought to your session before lunch, where you were talking about a particular group of people who were prepared to sit and reflect and think about being in a circle and think about sustaining each other. That's not for everybody at every stage of their life. There will be different ways that people will engage with this. There will be different cultures will have to engage with it differently along the way. So I think the hope in some ways is in identifying what are the values, kind of picking up on something Sarah was saying there as well. If we get the values right, if we get the principles right, that will sustain us in hard times, which will undoubtedly come. It will also sustain us in the amount of collaboration that's needed with, again, in a sector that's very limited in terms of resources, in terms of time, in terms of the amount of work to be done. So I don't see any one way of doing it. What I would love to see is that we get from events like this, from the work that each of us is doing in our own area, that we build values of respect, of dignity, of equality. And if we do that, then like everything else, we will have 100 different ways of doing it. Some people will do it through reflection in groups. Yeah. Some people can't abide groups and will do it in their own way through research. Somebody else will just do it by being a good politician or a good shopkeeper or pharmacist. So I think it's about, if we can remind ourselves, particularly in a time where values are often being trashed by people, trashed was the word I wanted to say, I think, by people who seem to be, you know, cool and getting places and the rest of it. So to my mind, it's about that, and we can do it in different ways.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm interested in whether everybody else knows all that already and whether I'm just new to the party. But it's now kind of, I just think if we could agree on those basics, we'll find ways, our own ways.
Okay. Todd, value-based, you know, diverse, creative, and different approaches. That's the way, yeah?
Yeah, and I would agree. And I wrote down here so I didn't forget. There's no I in TEAM, isn't that right? So it's all about that grassroots approach and how we work together, as Noeline had said. If I reflect on the work that I did as a police officer for 20 years in the States, we worked very closely with the rape crisis centers, with the domestic violence centers, with the Department of Corrections, Department of Probation. We worked together with the focus on is keeping victims safe. And I underscore victims. And I think that today is another step forward where we talk about victims rather than delineating gender or not, but it's about looking at victims and how we can support them. So I think that's important. That's that step forward. That's what Noeline I think is talking about. And again, in some ways, people take a grassroots effort, do it in their own way at their own time, whereas others need to get together, work together to build that respect, the integrity, so we can accomplish that goal.
Thank you very much. Seán, just our last speaker, you know, when Gary was speaking, he was talking about, you know, you could say the half empty or the half full. You know, there have been some achievements, but my God, there was some disappointing information as well in the mix. For yourself, you know, for the last number of years working for the Men's Development Network, what do you see as the green shoots then of, you know, the practical application of what we need to change based on what Noeline and probably Sarah's saying as well, the values? How do we kind of by osmosis, or how do we create and support those values?
Well, I think I've always felt in my head, and this might be a very, very simplistic thought, but I always felt that we should have the Clunk Click advertising national campaign attached to engaging men and boys and addressing the issues of violence and addressing the issues of how they need to be engaged around their own health and well-being. I just say that where the conversations need to happen around the kitchen table, within the school environments, within work, you know, the conversations need to be, we need to create the conditions to allow the conversations to happen. And whether that's in a circle or whether that's wherever it may be, it doesn't really matter, or whether it's a one-to-one or whether it's in a group. But I think the interesting thing for me is around that collaborative, cooperative approach that is, that's where I see significant green shoots have been happening over the past a couple of years, where people are working collaboratively and agreeing to disagree, but yet see that they can work together to get to a certain end. And I think it has been underpinned by those core values when people talk about equality and professionalism, and you know, like we ourselves have love as a core value within our own strategic documents and stuff. So I think that there's a lot of things that are coalescing around. People are seeing those things together and knowing, even though they might be very different in their approach, they have those fundamental core values that actually connect. But I think the other thing is about the relationality of engaging with people is about relations and relationships. And I think creating partnerships and creating collaborations and cooperations is about being relational. It's about getting into a room and saying, looking into the whites of somebody's eye and say, actually, I can go down the road with this person. You know, and I think that's fundamental. And I think that's even more fundamental when you talk about, when Gary talked about saying that the big thing that happened around all the training that they did was the relational aspect around it. That was the positive thing that came out of it, whether it was around engaging young boys around work or gender equality. It was the fact that they related to the individual trainers and the people as well. So our life, all our lives are quite relational, and we need to really, we need to kind of embrace that, especially when we then go into the collaborative work around very big topics like what we've talked about today. So yeah.
Just, I suppose it's making me think in relation to Sarah or Noeline, for the good men, and there are good men in the world, I hope. What would you be saying to them in relation to hope? What are you saying to us today if we give you the platform to say, this is what we want from you in relation to hope, and this is our hope for you as men and younger men, that this is how you would be in the world? What does that look like for you, that we could be ambassadors with you and for you?
Don't mind jumping in first, but I'm gonna borrow something from a conversation that Seán was a part of as well, that we had a few weeks ago with Jackson Katz, who some of you would be familiar with, where he was talking about concepts of being explicit about moving from the phrase of male engagement to male activism. Was that the word you used, Seán? I can't remember.
He used mobilization, but
mobilization, that was the word. Yeah. So I think critically, what, just to be bold and clear about it, is, you know, we don't just want to engage in private and quiet conversations with men. We also want to see men actively engaging in conversations with each other and publicly mobilized on this issue. Because I think what I hear more and more and more, and what I'm kind of putting into my own toolbox, and Noeline, you're not new to the party, we learn new things constantly, I think, is that this is, I mean, I've worked so many years where it has been about holding things in a victim survivor centered space, but at the same time, you know, more and more, I think the articulation has to be is that to achieve gender equality is, and to work against male violence against women is also to achieve, you know, a really positive environment and you know, and lived experience for men and boys as well, and reduces male violence against men. And so for me, it's around, okay, we can accept that we have a gender unequal society, we can accept that we have an issue with male violence against both women and men, but we want to see more mobilization. And I think it is probably fair to say that the heavy lifting has been done by the women's movement on the violence against women issue. But I take again that hope that, you know, the majority of the audience here today is male. The majority of the inputs are from men who are mobilized on this. So it's around, how do we build that mobilization? And so we have the engagement first, but now we also need to kind of translate that actively to the mobilization piece. Okay, very good. Noeline, would you like to please add to Sarah's?
Yeah, so that's all great, and in fact I will use that again. That's a real good challenge. I have just I think there is another bit of a challenge for men in terms of understanding how deep-rooted their privilege has been over time, in order to come to a situation where we are not equal, and where a lot of violence, sexual violence, violence against women, domestic violence, gender-based violence, where gender-based violence is deep-rooted in the way that centuries of our traditions have taught men and women to be, and taught all the genders to be. But it's not specific only to the question of good men. As you said that, Lorcan, it struck me that we all, for instance, in Ireland, would like to think for the most part, we like to think we're good people, and we like to think we do our bit. But I think we often very forget as a people how extraordinarily privileged we are to live in such a rich society, to speak a main language, to have, for all its flaws, to have a system of reasonable democracy, not to be fleeing in a boat because there's literally nothing to eat where we are right now, and to risk drowning in the sea in order to get to a place of safety. We don't remember the level of privilege we have when we exclude other people either. So we women too have to think about a whole lot of areas where we don't understand or don't reflect enough on our privilege. And I just think it's one aspect of it. So while I would say it's very deep rooted, all of the ways in which, I was just talking earlier to people about the court system, how structured it is in order to reflect a male mentality about good women and bad women. And that an awful lot comes from that. But it's that's not because the court system or the justice system is bad. It's because of the way that people no longer even notice where they are entitled. So there's something about just recognizing that if somebody is challenging you, as Sarah has just challenged there now, there's no need to be defensive about it. But there is a need to understand that however good you are and however equality minded you are as well as a man, you come into this world on the shoulders and with the benefit of generations and centuries of privilege as against women. Okay. It's just a reality. We're so lucky to live in an age where we can address these things now. I am so lucky, you know, I mean, you know, had I been born even a few years earlier, I wouldn't stay at secondary school. There's a good chance. Like I still quote the whole time the court case of less than 50 years ago, where the court said a wife is a chattel, just like a cow or a thoroughbred horse in an Irish court. You would not say that now. You can't actually, it's not the law anymore. But it was less than 50 years ago. So we're making progress, but there is still a very strong need to understand what's needed to make us equal. And that's what will make the difference.
And Seán, can you add your voice to that? What do you think is it?
Oh, there's part of me just wants to say, oh, ditto. Oh, this, like, you know, why? I don't want to try and mansplain it in any way. I think the whole idea of not being able, I think in terms of hope, I feel that would be a great place to be in where we don't feel we need to defend ourselves or feel that we're under attack even when we kind of try and address these particular issues, you know, that we come into it where we say, okay, yeah, when somebody challenges you and challenges in an appropriate way, that you can take that on and listen to it with the good intentions in which it was given, and that you can move on and actually try and actually change something about it. So I think, and there is just such a huge amount of baggage that we do bring with us. And I always remember a while back Adele Hackett talking about putting the mirror up to herself one day when she was just looking at her own children in her own house about what she was thinking, that, like, you know, as she say, a strong ardent feminist, to be kind of saying, like, you know, what have I done sometimes to create the conditions of where my son thinks it's okay to sit and wait till I come home, but my daughter wouldn't think of doing that. You know, to start a dinner or whatever it may be. So I think there are lots of those kind of challenges that are there, but they're all, I think the thing is, they are all our challenges. And I just love the notion that, and we did this with Adam this morning, where we were trying kind of, someone put me on the spot in some ways around talking about, well, if you're trying to change, what are the key things that you want to change, and what is the language that we want to do about it, and how would you do it? And it was around that sense of entitlement that you'd like to be able to get beyond, you know, and move it in. So I think, and that you didn't lose anything. As a man, you didn't lose anything, not one jot, if this was addressed.
Todd, you've been silent for a while. We'll bring you in to say more about hope in the context, especially of what Sarah and Noeline have said to us.
Yeah, when I was listening to Noeline, I reminisce the days when I was a coordinator and a facilitator with the perpetrator programs in the United States. And I remember as a facilitator, and I'm the youngest of 10, raised in a very good middle-class family, but as a facilitator and listening to the men, lots of things, you know, you learn in those programs. But one thing, and I say it today, we know that domestic violence is a choice, and they make the choice to do that or not. We also know that it has a lot of their behaviors is about their belief system, and you examine your belief system, but we also know that that can change. You have an understanding why you do what you do. And then from there, it's the actions you take. And again, you make a choice to do that. For me, I think the optimism is something that we really need to look at, is to be more proactive. Why do we have to wait until they're incarcerated or in the criminal justice system to just have those conversations, that narrative, just to speak about that? A lot of men and women wouldn't know why, the perpetrator does what they do, just that they do it. So I think it's important to examine why. So when I hear Noeline talking about, how, our roots and how we were raised, well, we wouldn't have an understanding of what other cultures go through. I think it's important to continue that narrative. And that's something that I think happens today. It starts today and continues. So that would be my reflection of my response. The other piece would be, again, when I think about my days in law enforcement, we look at the primary aggressor. And I know Ireland has become very progressive in terms of how they're responding to domestic and sexual violence cases in the courts. And Sarah alluded to that earlier. But I think that's really important to look at the individual, their actions, and then from there, what the response is. And it has to be a proactive response with the view to stopping the violence, breaking that cycle right then and there.
Okay, I'm just really conscious of the time already, believe it or not. It's coming up to 5 minutes to 4 o'clock. Can I ask this just maybe as we're coming in to land at the end of a very busy day and a very good day, I hope, for people who attended really some really interesting workshops, interesting presentations and blinding insights, and wake-up calls and invitations to be mobilized, to go back to Sarah, that word that we were looking for a few moments ago. And I'm just interested in seeing for yourselves then, before we go, maybe Seán, even to start off with you, and we'll come back around the block, for mobilization, to use that word, for hope, to mobilize for hope. What are the actions that you see, even for Men's Development Network? I know the white ribbon is there. It's a call to action. It's a mobilization. It's a stepping up and a stepping in. It's a naming something. It's an action, and it's a hopeful action. What do you see for the organization in relation to some of those steps, briefly?
I think certainly for me, the critical objective is the further development of those cooperations and collaborations that we've been engaged with today, and to have them really embedded in our work on a day-to-day basis, and hopefully that they don't become, they're not just once-off projects, that they become key core work that has to be done and delivered on an ongoing basis. Gary said today, this work has been done, and yet there's so little has happened in some senses. This is a journey that we're all on, and we are taking with us, as you say, as I think saying, centuries of baggage with us that we have to unload along the way, and sometimes we have to go the same distance before we get rid of it all. So I'm optimistic about it, but I'm not naive to think that this will happen with a stroke of a brush. It's not like that. I hope that there are many people will stand on the shoulders of us as we move forward, and feel that they're a little bit higher as we get along the road. And I think that is the big hope for me. But I think it is based around those collaborations and cooperations that we've started at this point in time.
Okay. And Sarah, for yourself, the mobilization part, or what do you think it looks like or feels like for you?
I suppose it's kind of echoing what Seán has said, although I also do want to circle back to what Noeline said, because I think it is incredibly important, is that in any collaboration, what we do need to do, and I say this as as the the CEO of an organization who have had to make this very explicit in our own strategic plan for our own development, both in terms of our internal teams and also our project work, and is that thing of making sure we start with the intersectional perspective, that we don't consider those who have less advantage, those who are maybe more minoritized, and so that's based on ethnicity or ability or sexuality, or is that we embed that into our thinking and our collaborations from the outset, because I think when we look at our society, as Noeline rightly says, it's a very privileged, it's a very rich society compared to others, and yet we are still saying that the mainstream are suffering a disproportionate amount of male violence against women, but that is far higher for other groups. And a lot of that is rooted in those systemic things we are trying to change. So it is to our benefit that we start on the basis of looking at structural and systemic change around legislation or policies or services or whatever it may be, behaviours and attitudes that are inclusive from the outset of everybody. And so I'm kind of excited to build those collaborations, and I think that that's going to be a really important facet of us achieving it in a really wholly equal and successful way.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah, and thanks for being here as well with us for the afternoon session. And
Thanks for
Todd,
the invitation.
we've got that Noeline in a few moments. For yourself, Todd, the mobilisation piece and your own work and the work going forward, what's the hope?
Well, I mean, the hope is that we continue our collaboration with good folks like Seán, from the Men's Network and Men's Aid and the other organizations. Something that Sonas is doing is we're looking at even piloting to have emergency accommodation available and some of the portfolio of our own properties to support those men that are in need of some type of an emergency accommodation. I think it's about cross training as well, and having a better understanding of how the Men's Network and others work with victims of violence, male victims of violence. It's about the cooperation and the collaboration. And again, we've done that, so we're opening up our offices to those workers who want to work with the clients, and we want to be there to be able to support them any way we can. I think that's the first step, really, and keeping our foot on the gas pedal, as we would say in America. And I think we're at a great start.
Okay, thank you, Todd. And Noeline, your last word, please.
Yeah, a bit of all of the above. And delighted to have heard all of that. I suppose two things that occurred to me out of those, and also just from our own experience. I think one of the things for our work, the manifestation of hope, is where those who have suffered sexual violence, any kind of gender-based violence, are heard and are listened to. That's, I think, what I mean by heard, that they're not just listened to, but that they're actually heard, and that their voices matter in the solutions we come up with in the future. And I think it's the slog, and I heard it from everybody here. Yeah. It's keeping at it. So for instance, we have done over the years campaigns around consent. And now we're doing what we're calling a project to try and ensure that we have a consistent focus where we are working with others working in the area, and that includes others on this webinar as well, and outside the, I suppose, gender-based violence sector as well, to try and build those cultures that we want, the decent cultures of respect for rights, dignity, equality. But it is a constant thing, because it is scary to see how quickly in hard times, particularly where there is, where you're trying to do too much and too little resources, it's easy to see how things can fall away, and how, I love that quote of Nelson Mandela, where he says, "May your choices be governed by your hopes and not by your fears." Yeah. But you see how fear can take over in places, and I just hope that we will continue, all of us, to work to choose what we want is right, and that will and that will that will be good for our whole society.
Thank you for that lovely, insightful last word, and to all of you for being here for the end of our day. We have somebody coming on in a moment, Noel, who's just going to say the final goodbye for us. That's Noel Sinnott, who's our MDN chairperson, and it'd be lovely to hear from him as well just before we go. The image that stays with me after Noeline speaking is Gary Barker speaking about the Indigenous people and the dancing together to hold the sky up. To keep that sky up, you have to dance every evening and probably every morning, but probably together dancing, we might just make it happen. And we're on that journey together. So thank you so very much. Thank you so much.
Well done on the day. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you.
So,
Lorcan, we're just waiting for Noel to join us. I've just messaged you in the chat there.
Yeah,
Good. That's good.
that's the effect.
Seán, have you any last word yourself to us? After
No, I didn't, except Noel, where are you? So no, I just want to send on the number so that we can. We haven't done too badly considering if this is the final.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to send on the number. Sorry.
Yeah. It really has. There's been some absolutely remarkable inputs today from beginning to end and workshops and whatever. So to everybody who was part of that, yeah, really, thank you so much, 25 years, I suppose, in the modern world feels like a long time now, 100 years ago, you used to see all the firms that ran for years and years, but 25 years is really worth marking, I suppose, and especially with people you've worked with and got to know, and it's really lovely.
Yeah. No, I think, like, finally today, we're coming to the end, and it's great to land it in a particular way. And I did really want to feel that I came out of today, not just with relief, but with a certain amount of enthusiasm and optimism beyond it. And so, but I think the 25 years has been, like, let's be honest, this work is not easy. And we've been fortunate to the people who've come before us, who've paved the way through and got in the doors of places that we never got before, and the likes of Alan and Lean beforehand in terms of that work, and it was vital. It's vital. It's allowed us to kind of step into another place, and not to be coming in defending the reasons why we're standing here. I think that's it's a lovely. I feel quite comfortable, coming into those spaces now compared to maybe a couple of years ago. There was always a challenge with it. There was always a question of why you were there, and always feeling the need that you had to say, well, listen, no, we're a men's development organization, not a men's rights organization. And it's key that you understand the difference within that. And I don't think we have to say that as much. And I think that's because the language is changing, and the discourse is changing, which is really, really important. And I think there's always that fear when you look out and you see the challenges that faces young men and young girls in our own society, and older men and girls as well. That you become overawed by all that has to be done. But I think there's significant things have happened, and I think certainly I talked about it this morning. I think that the third national strategy is a significant moment for us, and that it seems to be saying stuff that we saying it in a way that hasn't been said before, and that when we're engaging men and boys, that we're coming at it from a strengths-based perspective, and it's an invitation in as opposed to a pointing a finger at. And we know that in doing that, and our experience of 25 years of engaging with men in that particular way, it is what it offers is a vibrant, colourful engagement from men, and they want. I think Gary mentioned, they said that they, especially around the young men, when they talked about what their aspirations was, and that their beating heart of emotion was there. And I think that's a really nice picture I have in my mind as I step out of the day. So I don't know, Helena, we've gotten Noel? Has he come yet?
Dana Marie is just on the phone with him. I don't think she'll be much longer. Hopefully he'll be with us in just a moment. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, no worries. Okay. Yeah, so I think rather than to drag it out, I don't know if Todd or Sarah have anything else that you'd like to say beforehand. We're keeping you in the spot, but if
can I Seán, can I just come in with something? I'm just looking at a couple of the questions there.
Yes, that's a very good idea. Well done.
Damien Pilo raised the question of the thought about protecting cultural values and norms of minority groups that may be at odds with human rights and equality standards of the majority population. And I just think that's that's a piece of work that is also really, really important, because actually at base, there's a good chance that values and rights understanding, that the people hold the same things dear, whatever their culture, but the expression of them can be very, very different. And there can be kind of a patronizing attitude adopted by somebody in relation to who has the best answer along the way. So I think it's a valid point to be made that we're still talking in Ireland is quite a homogenous society, but it's not as homogenous as it was. And I think part of the answer will be where we learn from you know, those who are made into minorities, or those who see the world a bit differently to the way I might see it. But again, it's that business. Can we all step away from our entitlement in some ways and hope that we can live in a world where we respect each other? So I would think, I don't know, Damien is very good on these things himself, but I would think that it's not a question of that values are different depending on your culture. It's that they're often expressed differently, would be my sense of it.
I was looking at the questions as well, and I was inwardly percolating on Damien's question because I wasn't sure how to respond to, but I think I would very much agree with what Noeline's saying, is that it's around what are we calling values and what are we calling practices and what are we calling attitudes, but fundamentally what are we talking about in terms of how we are with each other. And I think that circles a little bit back to what Noeline said earlier around a foundational basis of shared values, but expressed maybe differently. Because I don't think for one moment Damien's talking about groups that violate what we consider human rights, but that they simply have different ways of existing. Their cultures and norms are different, and I think it's about us unpicking those things and making sure that we don't fall into racialized stereotypes and presumptions and assumptions that are paternalistic or patronizing. And in fact, you know, through my limited but some travels in the world, I have never not come away with a really interesting and different insight in terms of perspectives as to why people would think certain ways and why it's important that they do things certain ways, and rooted often in extremely valuable and rich and important value systems, you know, and it's about us unpicking and identifying where they are shared. And rooted also in a true kind of understanding of equality, which is where it isn't about one party dominating or restraining or withholding or suppressing the potential of another, and us kind of coexisting in a way that we're kind of enriched by including the perspectives of groups that are maybe minoritized. I hope that answers your question, Damien.
Yeah. Well, I actually thought that the question was answered earlier on. I have to say something that you said earlier on, Sarah. There is another question there, just say coming from Colin, and it's about the panel, the fantastic panel discussion. And when it comes to the heavy lifting work, which Sarah and Noeline have spoken of, he said, does the heavy lifting in engaging and mobilizing men and boys now rest with organizations like the MDN? Or will women's rights organizations have to continue to do this heavy lifting? And thanks everyone. So that's a particular question. It's maybe it's posed in terms to Noeline and Sarah, but I'm gonna throw it to Todd to say, do you think that that's the case? You know, other than
no, I think in some cases that there may be perception and it may be a reality, but I think there has to be. It's a collaboration, and I look at our work that we've done, Seán, and our. I mean, we've known each other for about 6 or 8 months, but we've actually gained lots of traction. So I think it's working together, and it's working with the likes of Noeline and the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre, and Sarah, and all my other colleagues within the domestic sexual gender-based violence sector. So it's not just one person. I think the challenge is it becomes political, and the challenge becomes historical, where some folks say they stay in their own lane and they only focus in one area. I would be probably more nuanced based on my experiences in North America and in Europe, here in Ireland, is that I think that we work together, because a stronger force, a stronger group of people becomes a stronger voice, and that's where we get the heavy lifting accomplished. So that would be my take on that.
Okay. Does anyone want to throw anything else in with that?
The only thing I would say about this is, and I know, like, I am often told I sound like a broken record going over the same things again and again, but we are always going to need the advocacy for particular areas. You're still going to need to explain the issues around domestic violence, Sarah and Todd. I'm still going to need to do what I'm doing around sexual while we're doing these jobs, because if they lose us, they lose hearing from that third sector, the civil society. They lose the people who won't trust a government agency, where a government agency won't have the approach we have, and where they won't necessarily have the passion we have either. So it won't be necessarily women's groups, but I think there will have to continue to be advocates against gender-based violence. There will have to be advocates for women's rights, because these, again, you're trying to change so much. There will have to be advocates for minority rights of various sorts, for anti-racism, all of the areas where rights are held. And what we are lucky with in our society is that we have that third sector. We have all the NGOs with whom government is collaborating really well. And I think what the gender-based violence sector will have shown is that that collaboration in building that third national strategy has been useful. And it has been actually a human rights-based approach, whereby us participating in it, we will actually do better in delivering the outcomes that government want as well. So yeah, but so I'd say there'd be a place for the women's rights groups.
Yeah, I would also add that I think it's absolutely crucial that it's about an expanded collaboration rather than a collapsing or a diversion, because it is very true to say that parity of esteem between, say, statutory and civil society has not been always the norm, and a recognition of the professionalism, and also, as Noeline has said, that direct knowledge and particularly the direct knowledge of those who have the lived experience of the violence and the abuse that we're trying to stop. So I think it is absolutely crucial that, you know, that esteem is maintained and built on. And I think there's still work to be done there. And you know, that goes for, I mean, the Men's Development Network likewise is a civil society organization, but we need, you know, in recognizing the professionalism of the sector rather than trying to divert the activity, you know, wholly into you know, state structures and things like that. I think that there is a crucial importance that the grassroots component, and crucially the feminist analysis is maintained. It is surprisingly slippery and easy to see that disappear once one gets into consultation and negotiation on particularly things like legislation and policy. So I think that comes back to our foundational red lines in terms of the reality of our society and where we are trying to get to.
Very good.
I think I tell you what I'm going to do, folks. There's challenges trying to get Noeline, and they're hoping to have them in now. But I'm just conscious of the time. Yeah. It's coming up to 4:20. So what I'm going to do really is I'm going to wrap it up. Really, for it just be unfair to keep you all in here and talking on the basis of it, as much as we really would like to have Noel, our chair, here. And it's important that people see that we do have a board of directors that keeps us all in check, and all that we have to do. So, like, I'm going to take the decision to kind of say let's wrap it up, and to say thank you to all. And I suppose the key thank yous that I'd really I was hoping that Noel would probably be able to do is just to say thank you first off to our core funders, who are the Department of Justice, TUSA, and the Health Service Executive, who allow us to do the program work that we do. That informs a lot of the other work that we need to do around talking about the broader sense of how this work is. I also want to make a special thank you to the Department of Health in relation to they supported the survey that we've done, and so we wouldn't have had this really vital data that we now have available to us in terms of to inform us on how we do the new programs and new initiatives that we might do in collaboration with everyone else. Also, I think I want to thank Just in Science too, for sponsoring the sign language. I think they've done a fantastic job today, and I want to thank them for all of their input throughout the day and their ability to be able to do that and ensure that we're as inclusive as we can be. I also want to thank our contributors, especially the Minister this morning, but also our keynote speakers, Gary and Michael, and the other 15 presenters and panelists. Like, without you today wouldn't have happened. I don't think it would have been as vibrant or as expansive. And it was really important to us that we celebrated today with all of our friends and all of our colleagues and all of the organizations that we have worked in partnership and collaboration over the last years. I also want to say thank you to our support team within MDN today. There was a support person in each of those sessions, so I want to thank them. And I also want to thank our organising team, which was Joe English and Jamie O'Keefe, who did a lot of the background work prior to today to make it seem as smooth as we possibly have. And then finally, I kind of want to say thank you to the virtual events partners who are IMS, who really held our hands throughout this process today. And this is the only unfortunate glitch was Noel here this afternoon. So, but you've done a fantastic job, and I really want to thank you for that. And last but not least, I really want to thank all the attendees and everyone else who came today. It's been magic for us to be in this position and to be with you all and to celebrate with you. So I thank you all very much. I hope you've gained something today from today, and it was a pleasure and a privilege for us as an organization to be able to provide it. So thank you very much.